Okay, back with another book review for you today. This one on thinking in bets. The main idea, the big takeaway from this book is that we should separate the process, the quality of our decisions, and the decision-making process from the outcomes and the results. So she argues, Annie Duke, that there is a tendency to judge the quality of our decisions and of the options we choose retrospectively by the outcomes that they lead to. And she argues this is a mistake and that life is full of uncertainty and unknowables and chance. She argues in the first chapter, for example, that there was an NFL match, an American football match, in which, in the dying embers, a player made a pass which was intercepted and consequently the team lost. And afterwards, all of the commentators condemned the player for making the pass and said it was a terrible decision because the consequence of it was that the team lost the match. But she argues that it was actually a very good decision to make the pass in the last few moments of the match because the statistics and the probability and the chances of success were much higher. But it was just that a player on the opposing team happened to intercept the pass, spot what was going on. So in other words, the losing team in this particular case were extremely unlucky. They were very unfortunate to win the match. But that does not mean that the pass that the player made was a bad decision. It just so happens that the chance-based factors which were beyond the control of the losing team went against them. She argues that life generally is not like chess, but is more like poker, in that we make decisions all of the time, but we're operating with a very large degree of uncertainty. We're making choices and decisions all of the time. Essentially, we're making bets in our everyday lives, but there are things that we can't foresee. There's unknowns, there's the potential of black swans, and there's a lot beyond our ability to perceive and understand. So we can only look at improving the rationality and the aspects of our decision-making ability. The goal is to try to be more objective, more skeptical, more thinking about where we might be biased and our tendency to be overly optimistic and thinking that we're more likely to have success than we actually are. She argues that we need to be always questioning our assumptions and our beliefs, and also to surround ourselves with people who are going to criticize and question our opinions and ideas and decisions and choices, because ultimately this is only going to improve the decision-making process. She argues the outcomes will take care of themselves, and as I've said right from the start, the main point of this book is to treat the two differently. In the case of football, for example, Team A might play extremely well and still lose due to a referee decision or something that happened in a match that was very unlikely and very unlucky for the team that loses. But it doesn't mean the team played badly. Conversely, a team can play very badly and still win the match due to luck and chance. She was a professional poker player, so she looks at this particular point about decision making through the lens of poker and of trying to analyse probabilities and think probabilistically about potential outcomes when getting cards, and not knowing what the remaining cards will be. So in other words, poker is quite obviously a game, an activity that has a large degree of uncertainty. But to try to improve decision making by looking at what is the most rational thing to do at any given point, and almost to ignore the outcome, because the outcome is unknown. All we can really do is try to increase the chances, increase the probability of a favourable outcome, whatever that might be. She argues that thinking in bets applies to all areas of life. So there are the not hugely consequential decisions that we make: what to have for tea, what to drink, whether or not to take the dog for a walk, whether or not to send an SMS or a message to someone. There are little decisions. There are obviously medium-sized decisions. These could be whether or not to apply for a particular job, which car to buy, whether or not to buy a pet dog, for example. This is obviously a medium-sized decision that's going to be quite consequential. It's going to affect our everyday lives, perhaps for 10 or more years. And then there are large decisions to be made, potentially whether or not to move to a different country, whether or not to get married and to whom one should get married, about having kids. There are obviously very large decisions that we need to make as well. But she argues that everything we do essentially is a choice. There are a number of options and they all lead to different outcomes, and all we can really try to do is improve the quality of our decisions so that over time we're more likely to be happy and prosperous as a result and find ourselves in happier circumstances. But we can only do that by improving decision making and not worrying too much about the outcome, because the outcome is quite independent, possibly completely independent of the process. So it's a good book, was an interesting read. Do go and check it out. Thank you for watching.